Hey, One World Entertainment, and just yesterday we reviewed this episode. Yeah, I haven't recovered from watching it. This episode of Star Trek Stranger Worlds, Season 4, Episode 4, and it was the Noir episode. And I said in the review that there was a Klingon commander who Dr. Umbega over here recognized and said, oh, he could recognize me. And I didn't quite catch the name he said. And then after I put up the video and I went online, I had a look around, and all of a sudden I see reviews talking about the episode and telling us exactly who they were talking about. Because the guy's name, I'm pretty sure, was only said once. Maybe twice. And I'll be honest with you, I kept zoning out in this episode. I keep zoning out in all of them. It's a Klingon we've met before. In fact, we've met him a few times. Both in the original series and in Star Trek Deep Space Nine. That's right. And he's the same Klingon. He's Commander Kor. This guy, just for people going, recognize the name, but why can't they place the person? This guy is this guy. One of these things ain't like the other. How are they going to explain this version of him from this version of him when this is only a few years before this? Not to mention, when this guy shows up and no one aboard the Enterprise knows of him, how are they going to explain that he tortured Uhura? Yeah, he used the mind scanner on Uhura. He is the one who came in and freed Uhura when he said, you're free to go. Yeah. So, this right here is meant to be, from the original series, none other than Commander Kor. This guy right here.
Right.
Do they not realize how much they complicate the whole canon when it comes to this crap? This is him in DS9. Played by the same actor. Now we know why they look like this and why they looked like the human version. Because Enterprise described that. So, obviously, they had the joke in DS9 when, of course, the Klingon design changed to this in the motion picture. And, of course, it then evolved again further throughout those movies. And then TNG came along and really kind of owned it, really. And then we got to DS9 and we had the episode where they went back in time. And obviously it was the episode Trouble with Tribbles. And when Worf goes, Klingons. And I'm pretty sure it was O'Brien going, where? And they're like, that's the Klingons right there. And they're all going like, that's the Klingon? And they all lean into Worf, and Worf goes, we don't discuss it with outsiders. Enterprise showed us exactly what happened. It was the eugenics stuff. That they tried to do a Khan Union Singh type thing and alter the DNA. And the result was that Klingons got stronger and smarter, but they ended up looking human. That is the explanation. And then, of course, it wore off, and the more generations that went, they came back to being proper Klingons. That was the explanation. And it made sense, you know. And it was good in DS9 that they played into the idea of, like, hang on, they don't look anything like you, Worf, what the hell? They look human. What happened? And they're like, we don't discuss it. But then Enterprise did show us how it happened. So, Kor is like this. Not this. He obviously changes back to this. But in the 23rd century, whether it was from birth or not, he was humanoid. Like the no ridges on the forehead and stuff like that. And yet, here he is in Strange New Worlds, only a few years before he would arrive in the original series, and he's fully Klingon. Like, ridges, everything. What's going on? So, there is kind of a bit of an article that talks about it, which I'll kind of go over a small bit of. It says the latest Star Trek Strange New Worlds takes the Enterprise into Klingon territory. A mission to recover a Federation probe sees Uhura, Una, and Dr. Mbega trapped on a planet occupied by the Klingon Empire, where they fall into helping the local resistance. They don't really. It ends up being that. The episode's noir, old Hollywood thriller vibe is complemented by being presented in literal black and white, which was just a gimmick. There's a familiar face spearheading this occupation. Klingon Commander Kor, aka the very first Klingon villain in all of Star Trek. Kor debuted in the original series episode An Errand of Mercy, played by John, I'm never actually quite certain how you pronounce his name, Cullux, I think. I butchered that. In one of the best Star Trek guest spots. This was the first episode to ever depict the Klingons, establishing them as adversaries to the Federation and the show's go-to villain for Cold War allegory episodes. In this episode, the Federation and Klingons are contesting the planet Organa, occupied by the Klingons, and blah blah blah. Captain Kirk and Spock go undercover on the planet to sabotage Kor's occupation. The way they framed that sounded like they were talking about this episode, the Strange New Worlds episode. So I was getting confused when I saw the names Spock and Kirk. I was like, they're not in this episode on the planet. It's well-known Star Trek trivia that the Klingons went from simple villains in the original series to honor-obsessed warriors in the Next Generation. Blah, blah, blah. It kind of just then talks about all of this stuff. So Kor appeared in an episode of Star Trek the Animated Series, The Time Trap. The Animated Series was famously stingy, okay, with voice actors. Walter Koenig was dropped from the cast, and Nichelle Nichols and George Takei would have been too if Leonard Nimoy hadn't put his foot down. So rather than bringing back Cordus, or Cloacus, however to pronounce his name, the Time Trap has James Doonan pull double duty as Kor. 30 years after the original Star Trek ended, John himself returned as an older Kor on Star Trek Deep Space Nine. By the 24th century, when Deep Space Nine was set, the Federation and the Klingons had become allies, complementing a prediction made by the Organans at the end of An Errand of Mercy. Kor was thus recast for villain to a living legend, and blah blah blah. And yet, that is meant to be that. And it's probably only about 4 years before this. Now, obviously, you could make the argument, well, simply, he'll change at this stage, but the indication would be that they took the enhancements then for the genetic stuff after Strange New Worlds. But we know that's not the case because the Klingons took it before we got, like, 100 years before the original series and stuff like that. So none of them should look like this in this time period anyway. So that's why when Discovery was being made and they were talking about Klingons, and people were like, what are they going to do with the Klingons? Because they'd have to be the human looking versions, and then they weren't even Klingon looking versions. They came out and people were like, what the hell is that supposed to be? And when they said Klingons, people were, that's not a Klingon. they've muddied the water so much. It's unbelievable. But to try and reintroduce him, and look, he's meant to be a living legend. Obviously, him and Kirk had back and forths, but they had a mutual respect for one another and stuff like that. When they're talking about Kor in this episode, and Vega's talking like how he was like this merciless ruler in the war, that like prisoners, no prisoners, just kill anything and everything, and so just made him like basically a Hitler, for the lack of better terms. And to paint a character like that and then have him be so beloved in the original series and DS9 and stuff, it's like you really don't understand what you're doing to these characters, these stories and everything else. So at the end of the day, this again, which like why does he still have normal teeth, is meant to be this. As I said, one of these things ain't like the other. But let me know what you think. Do you think it's artistic license to do what they want with it? Do you think it does confuse the whole look and story of Commander Kor? Do you think they just went, hey, here's a name that Star Trek fans will recognise, let's just use that? What do you think about all of this? Do let me know, because it is so ridiculous. And with that, I shall leave it there for this one. So do like and share and subscribe and hit that hype button and all of that good stuff. Cheers, and I'll catch you all in the next one.